Good evening, everybody. Good evening, fellow Burbankers. I've only lived here 22 years, so I'm a newcomer. You guys have probably been here a little bit longer than me. Welcome to this evening's program. Tonight, we have the famous, very famous Burbankia webmasters and their cohort at the back table. Corey Fredrickson is doing books tonight. Please welcome, as you know them very well, Wes Clark and Mike McDaniel.
Thank you, Burbank, and good evening. Mike, would you like to do your shout-out?
Yes, I do. Before we get started, since this was most likely going to be our last presentation ever here, I'm retiring and moving away, and Wes already has moved away, so it's going to be hard for us to get here. But in the beginning, there were two library ladies, and they saw the amazing things that we were doing and asked us if we would like to do a show. I'd like to shout out to Joan Kapaki and Louise Pazak, who have kept us here and helped us with the library and got us in here and had us speak. And then I guess you all liked us, so they brought us back several times, including tonight. And we'd like to thank them and give them a round of applause, even though they're not here.
Okay, we've entitled this presentation, The Best of Burbankia, Fun Facts and Photos. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce the third book to you, but not in the same detail that we did last year's presentation. That was exclusively the third book. We'll talk a little bit about the third book, and then we'll go into, well, just some of the really interesting things about Burbankia that we found in photographs. We always start out, we never assume that everybody knows who we are. We're not all that famous. So what we do is we always start off with an introduction. Mike will introduce me, and then I'll introduce him.
This is my good friend, Wes Clark. We've been friends since our junior year in high school.
1972.
72. He was born in Los Angeles. He attended all Burbank schools, and we graduated from the Burbank High Class of 1974. Burroughs students, please hold your applause. He lived in Burbank till 1980, now lives in Virginia. He works for the Patent and Trade Office. He's interested in history and lots of other stuff. He was in the Marine Corps from 74 to 78, and he's our webmaster. He's the guy who makes all of those pictures look really great on there, whatever platform, whether it's your cell phone, tablet, or a laptop computer, it all looks good. He's a co-author of Lost Burbank, our first book, Growing Up in Burbank, our second, and our current, True Tales from Burbank.
And that's a photograph of...
Oh, yes.
I was Mike's best man at his wedding, and he was my best man at my wedding. And that's a photograph all the way from 1980.
And what happened in that photo is that we were, standing there, and the lady who was doing the photography said, no, relax, act natural. And that's what she got.
Natural is what you get. This handsome gentleman here with me is Mike McDaniel. He was born in Burbank in the community hospital, which does not exist anymore. He's attended Burbank schools, once again, class of 1974, Burbank High. He's lived in Burbank his entire life. He works for the city. He's in the reprographics department, which is in the basement of City Hall. Go and visit him anytime, but that's where he is for now. Retirement beckons. He's interested in history. He's very interested in World War II history. He collects memorabilia. He's a member of the Veterans Committee. So if you've ever been involved in any of the veterans affairs here, you've seen and heard him. And he wrote the Burbank Veterans Book, which is the last word on Burbank's veterans, those who have died in our nation's wars. And co-author with me of our three books, Lost Burbank, Growing Up in Burbank, and True Tales from Burbank. We always give a shout out to the Burbank Historical Society. Wonderful people, wonderful place, a wonderful institution. We acknowledge their splendid work done on our behalf since 1973. You can find them at burbankhistoricalsoc.com. And many of the photos in our books and in this slideshow tonight come from the holdings of the Burbank Historical Society. All right, Burbankia website. This is something Mike and I started in 2003. There's the URL. Or you could just Google Burbankia, and that'll get you there. Or go to wesclark.com. People ask me, why is that name Wes Clark familiar? There was a general who ran for president in 2004. I'm not that man, but that's wesclark.com. I've got his website.
But he did ask him to give up his website.
Yeah, he asked me if he could sell this website to me, and I, nah. It created 2003, it's been up for 16 years. I've counted, I've updated it 900 times since then. There are 215 text files, pages on this. There's 5,870. There are more because I've added more. There are 645 more images than last year. We're constantly putting the images in this. It is a real rabbit hole. There are 20 plus complete books and pamphlets, 143 videos, no ads. That gets some applause, the no ads. Just a little. Okay, True Tales from Burbank. This is our third book. We published it last year. Arcadia, the History Press. We're selling autographed copies at this event. That's what it looks like. Mike, would you like to talk about the content?
This is the table of contents, and basically it starts with our preface and acknowledgments. Then it moves to Burbank's earliest years, everything before 1920. Then boom or bust, 1920 through 39. The World War II era, 40 to 45. From Truman to Nixon, 46 through 1960. And the all-important disco decade. Trust me, that's my favorite decade. Anyway, 1970 to 1980. These are stories that we found in all sorts of newspapers. Wes has access to a lot of newspaper archives. And some of these stories in this thing are just crazy, but they're true and they happened here.
Let me give you an explanation. Our first book, Lost Burbank, that was a lighthearted look at Burbank history. It's Burbank History Light. The second book, Growing Up in Burbank, that's an account of being a baby boomer and growing up here. And this third book arrived because just when we think we've heard it all, just when we think we've read it all, something weird in Burbank history pops up. And this book is a collection of all of the oddball things that we've discovered about Burbank. So let's start with Chapter 1, Burbank's earliest years. This is the Burbank High School student body in 1909, the entire student body. Can you find the teachers? Pick out the teachers from the...
Love her hair.
Yeah, we love her wild bulldog hair, that one gal in the front, but that's...
Her and the girl next to her biting their lower lip. This must have been a real tense photograph.
You want to point out DeLoss Wilbur?
Ah, yes. There's a gentleman over here.
The one who looks rather aesthetic and artsy, that fellow right there.
He is responsible for some of the most neat photos that we have in the early period of Burbank, right after the city was incorporated, from about 1911 to 1922. He went around town shooting photos, and he documented them like mad. He gives you the day, the time, where the sun was, what degree,
You'll be seeing some of his photos later on in the slideshow. This is the Burbank basketball squad in 1916. Spread out, guys. This is spread out, please.
The question is, who didn't get the memo? Did the sock guys get the memo, or did the non-sock guys get the memo? We don't know which.
And really, really high, my son calls them booty shorts. That must have been a thing back in the old days. This is Joseph Wesley Fox, this fellow here. He was one of Burbank's more interesting characters in the early years. He was he was something of a crackpot, actually. However, he was also an inventor. And when you go into a shopping mall and you see one of those ads with it has one ad and then it rolls up and then it brings up another ad, that's his invention for that. So he actually invented a new and novel way, and it's in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office where I work.
1901 is when he came up with that.
Tell us about the cross shotguns, Mike.
Mr. Fox was the head of the group that wanted to de-incorporate Burbank. Burbank voted to become its own city separate from L.A., and he was dead set against this. And a lot of people didn't like him because of his dead set. If you notice back here on his, this is his pedestal where he preached going back to
Annexation.
And you can see a shotgun here, and you see another one moving up through there, and they're crossed. And the hammers are back, and he's ready for anybody who wants to come and bother him. So, and he already has lambasted one child in the rear end with some rock salt on his property for encroaching upon him. So Mr. Fox was a bit of a problem.
He was once hung in effigy in the middle of San Fernando Road. They made a Joe Fox dummy, hung it up, and burned it. To give you an idea what the folks in Burbank thought of him and his family, you can read about him in the books, interesting guy. Now, Chapter 2, Boom and Bust. There was an interesting thing that occurred in Burbank in 1921. Between 15,000, 20,000 spectators. The whole purpose of this event was to raise $125,000 for a War Heroes Memorial. They had a plane flying around Los Angeles with this enormous electrically lit star with the motto, "Follow the Star," to Burbank. It frightened people. They didn't know what this was. There was a rodeo associated with it where life was cheap. I'm not entirely sure what was meant by that. There may have been some accidents in the rodeo. There was a boxing match reenactment. There was an air show. There were World War I dogfight reenactments. There was a mission village with dancing girls and troubadours, all in Burbank. A float procession, National Guard parade, California history pageant, biblical films. It's not very well known. In the third book, we talk about how the first studio in Burbank was an organization that was set up with the idea to film the Bible, make silent movies of the Bible.
All the way through from Genesis.
Mardi Gras festival. It was enormous. So you would think we would have lots of photographs from it, right? Well, wrong. Here's the only thing we have. Mike?
And it's amazing to me that her name isn't even on it. And she was one of the workers, and it isn't really even a photograph, it's a negative that they stapled to it. And I don't know, but there's not, with all the pageantry that was going on, the Benmar Hills project up there where the houses are up near John Muir and everything, that was the land. They covered it all up there. All of that land was covered by this event.
It was called Woodland Heights.
Yeah, it wasn't quite Benmar then. But anyway, to make a long story short, they just were everywhere, but nobody took pictures. And we're wondering why.
So let's talk about constipation. Burbank was a leader in the anti-constipation movement. There was a woman named Genevieve Jackson. She founded a company. She was a dietitian. She gave talks about nutrition. She created a company where they generated lots of food containing bran. As you can see, there are figgle sticks, taffy, bran, and fig. Honey brannies, wheat bran. Sweet brannies, bran. For diabetics, diet biscuits, more bran. You're beginning to get the idea. She also marketed dehydrated lemons and oranges for use that were sent back east to produce pectin and acids. But this Genevieve Jackson company, it was located near where the modern media center is on Front Street.
Yeah, the train station.
The train station. So that's Burbank's contribution to fighting constipation. Mike?
Here's Boom and Bust again, and now this time we have the Burroughs High School guys with their strange shorts on for their basketball team.
We find these pictures rather often, kids with their hair parted in the middle, you know. It's 1924, obviously, a basketball team from the 1920s. This is your favorite, Mike.
Yeah, this is my favorite picture. I love this. This is Burbank on parade, and these lovely ladies and their tow horses here won this trophy in Burbank on parade, and we're still trying to figure out what that is that they've got it put on there. But it's just, you've got these angels up here and the lyre in the middle there and all the flowers all over it. But there's no captions on any of these things. We don't know, other than we're assuming that it's from Burbank on parade.
The fact that it happened in 1921 suggests it could have been associated with that big spectacle, or maybe not. Do you remember back in the 1970s how people used to claim that they used to be in the Little Rascals or Our Gang? That was a thing for a long time. It was bizarre. But we're happy to report that Burbank, California had its own honest-to-goodness Little Rascal. He was a member of the Our Gang ensemble, and in these films, his name was Douglas Greer. He was called Turkey Egg because of his mottled complexion. He reminded Hal Roach of a turkey egg. He was born in 1921, died in 2016. He was a Burbank High School graduate, age 21, a little late because he was working in the film industry, so it took him a while to get through high school. He worked at Lockheed as a sheet metal worker. That's a shot from him in the 1930 Little Rascal School's Out. And the question, Miss Crabtree, beautiful Miss Crabtree, that sweet young teacher, asked him, what was the name of Abraham Lincoln's mother? And his answer was, Mrs. Lincoln.
And here's one of our favorite things. Burbank has been stated for years being named after Luther Burbank, the famous botanist of the time.
The plant wizard.
But in truth and reality, it was Dr. David Burbank. This is a fine color painting of him on his wedding day from the Burbank Historical Society. Anyway, the Los Angeles Times has gone to great lengths over the years to make sure everybody realizes it's not Luther Burbank. As you can see, they've done this in 1911, 1927, 1934, 1936, 38, 42, 44, 64, 67, all the way up to 79. Now, fast forward to modern times. I'm watching the History Channel.
2014.
It's a nice show on where cities got their start. And one of the cities that they're profiling is Burbank, California. Oh, great, my interest is up. And what do they end their thing with? Well, wonderful city named after Luther Burbank.
Now, there's a Los Angeles Times article, and the writer had a great quote. Quote, people who name their town after a dentist don't exhibit a whole hell of a lot of imagination. Paul Coates, Los Angeles Times, 1960.
All of my emails to the History Channel have gone unanswered.
So, we're in World War II now, and the goal, there was a time when Americans thought they could have been invaded by the Empire of Japan. So the thought was, we need to arm the populace with gas masks in case of an attack. Little children don't want to wear their gas masks. So one innovative approach was to make the gas masks look like Mickey Mouse. These are freakishly designed gas masks. It didn't really catch on. There are apparently only 2 of these things left. One is owned by the Walt Disney Organization. I didn't even bother trying to contact them. The other one, I got a photograph from this great 45th Infantry Division Museum in Oklahoma City. They have the other one. So, I wrote only 3 known to exist. There are 3, and there it is, the Mickey Mouse gas mask.
Yes, this is Corporal Philip Ray Burke. As mentioned before, I'm on the Veterans Committee for the city, and we chronicle our veterans. And this young gentleman from Burbank High School, class of 41, he was very popular. He was a student body president. He threw himself on a hand grenade at the Battle of Tarawa to save his fellow Marines. He actually survived and came home. He was awarded the British Distinguished Service Cross, Service Medal, the Navy Cross, the Purple Heart. But he did die in 61 at the age of 38. We feel from his wounds he had suffered probably didn't help him any. But I want to point out that this guy was a very big hero. The Navy Cross is only one below the Medal of Honor. So for Marines and Navymen.
In the 3rd book, True Tales from Burbank, you will read about honest-to-goodness Burbank heroes. We have them.
And there are many of them.
So, World War II on the home front was an interesting place. This is a fellow who was a rodeo rider. His name was Elmer Schumann. At the Pickwick Stables, he spent 6 consecutive days atop a horse. Stop and think about that for a moment. How did
Pay attention to the bucket.
Yeah. This was something that was put into the LA Times, January 28, 1940. Elmer Schumann. We're also proud to list Marilyn Monroe, Norma Jean Daughtery, as she was known at the time. She's a Burbanker. She lived at 4215 Rowland Avenue, now since renamed Warner Boulevard. The home is still there. You could see it, the bottom shot, still there. That photo was circa 1947-48. Boy, did she take a great picture. I mean, you could see why she became a star. also became stars in Burbank.
We have a nice photo here of Debbie Reynolds and the soon-to-be Mayor Hinton of Burbank. And I want to point out, that everybody looks like they're really happy except for Mr. Reynolds. He didn't appreciate the stardom because he felt he should have been the breadwinner of the home. He made a pool or Debbie made a pool for him in his backyard, and he had it filled in. So he just wasn't really comfortable with her.
It has since been recovered by the present owner.
They have dug it up and fixed it up again. She was Miss Burbank in 1948, as I think everybody knows. Her name was Franny. She was always known as Franny.
Did any of you know her as Franny in school? We always ask.
We always ask. There's always a few sometimes. Anyway, let's see. This is 1948. She was there with Councilman Ralph Hinton and Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds in front of her home at 1034 Evergreen Street. All she wanted to do in life was be a gym teacher. That was her big goal in life. So, and here's two nice photos of her that we have gotten puzzling things about. There is at the Historical Society a Girl Scout uniform that suspiciously looks like this, but they don't know where they got that one. And the footprints and this fireman,
we don't get that photo at all. Sometimes
they're all unnamed, and we just thought, well, the only thing that we can be sure of in these photos is it's Debbie Reynolds.
Who is he? Why is she looking at footprints? We don't know. I like classical music a lot, so I am thrilled to report that the first stereo broadcast in broadcasting history was issued from Burbank, California. And the way it worked out was Maestro Leo Damiani, who was in charge of the Burbank Symphony Orchestra, he presided over a live broadcast on the 24th of December, 1956, Christmas Eve. And the way it worked was you would tune into NBC on the television, and that's where they broadcast the right channel, and then you would tune into the associated NBC affiliate on an AM radio. That was the left channel. So using that technology, they did the very first stereo broadcast, the Burbank Symphony Orchestra.
Here we have the start in Truman to Nixon. This is the Fleur de Lis Club. Women's clubs, when I was growing up like this, were very popular. On our block in my neighborhood, which I still live there, we had all these genteel old ladies who would sit there on their lawn and they'd knit. We had one this lady always reminds me of Mrs. Tewalt, the lady across the street from me. She tatted. She'd sit there and do threads. She'd make big American flags, and it just drove me nuts, even as a kid looking at it.
They were wonderful.
But we did this thing called visiting in the neighborhood here, and it wasn't just our neighborhood. You would go over to these nice ladies' houses, and they'd always have cake or cookies or tea or something, and they would share it with you, and then you move on, and then next time people come to your house.
Burbank social life. It was great.
The Women's Club of Burbank was started from a small group of women who served lunch at the Santa Rosa Hotel, which was where the post office is now on Olive Avenue. It was a huge, lavish hotel that Dr. Burbank built. Anyway, they were called the Lavender Salad Club, and they wore little lavender aprons, and and they morphed into this huge group of these type of little old ladies and formed the Burbank Women's Club.
We really like the cat's eye frames on the lady over there on the right. They're coming back in. I don't see any here, but maybe someday. This is an article that was in the Burbank yearbook. Males in quandary face hairstyle decisions. Okay, so think about the early surfing years. You've got one fellow with the standard crew cut. He's the one over there on the right. Then there's the fellow with the surfer cut in the middle. And then there's the fellow on the left, and that was called the darling wave. But the question was, which one would these boys elect? Well, to attract girls, let's face it, that's what they're trying to do. I think we're safe in saying maybe the surfer cut.
Center guy. Best
looking, I don't know. Okay, now this one, I apologize in advance. This comes from a different era, folks, 1968. A young woman named Francie Gottfried, 43, 25, 37. She would stop traffic on Wall Street as the traders rushed out of their offices to hang out of the windows to gape at this poor young woman as she simply walked down the street in a tight sweater. The New York Daily News reported, a bust panics Wall Street as the tape reads 43. So, what has this to do with Burbank? Well, KABC disc jockey Sweet Dick Whittington flies out with Burbanker Jerry Stotts, 47, 29, 38 to visit Wall Street. She shows up in a fuchsia mini dress with black boots, completely halts traffic once again. Stockbrokers are hanging out the windows, gaping at her. Jerry worked at Community Chevrolet. There's a funny story about how one woman used to know her, and her mother called her Miss Community Chest. Anyway, the police arrived to escort her away. Burbank wins, 47 to 43. The Battle of the Bus Lines.
Where did geek culture start? Geek culture started here in Burbank, in NBC. When they were reportedly going to cancel Star Trek, all of the Caltech nerdly types came out and protested. We love some of the signs that they're carrying. It's totally illogical to cancel Star Trek. And Spock for president in the back there, and then Draft Spock. I'm not quite sure about the Draft Spock one. That one was kind of...
There's some evidence that this was a publicity stunt organized by Gene Roddenberry to keep Star Trek on for the second season. There was a similar movement for the third season, and I, being a Star Trek fan, as a 13-year-old, duly wrote letters, do not cancel Star Trek. So I was a part of this as well. But we contend that geek culture started right here in Burbank, 1968.
Here's a local Burbank legend. Travis Bean guitars. Note the T in the head up here, and it was all machined aluminum. These things were finally handmade by Travis Bean. They were made them between 74 and 79, and they caught on with rock personalities at the time. Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, Keith Richards, and Greg Lake of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Ron Wood, Ace Frehley of Kiss. They all owned them. Travis Bean just died here not that long ago in 2011, but his guitars are highly sought after by people who love to play their rock and roll, and probably still many of the people who you see up here who are still alive use them.
So let's highlight Burbank's guitar legacy. It has one. Travis Bean guitars, Randy Rhoads, a famous guitarist, he was a Burbanker, and then finally Del Kesher. You may not know that name. He is considered the father of the wah pedal. He has a guitar, he has a recording studio here in Burbank. Great guy. When he was a young musician, he used to lease the garage from the back of my house when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Wonderful, wonderful gentleman.
Also, the wah-wah pedal that he invented, they were all manufactured on the corner of Lincoln and Victory, where the pool supply store.
Where Leslie's Pool Supplies is now. Okay, my father-in-law loves to tell this story. He passed away recently this July, and whenever I think of this, I think of him. This is Jack Moorman, M-O-O-R-M-A-N, 1945 graduate from Burbank High. Young, dynamic, blonde, handsome. The co-eds loved him, absolutely loved him. The male population of Burbank High couldn't stand him because he was getting all the girls. He was a really personable, handsome young man, Jack Moorman. So my father-in-law attends, there's class reunions, Burbank High, class 45. 30 years later, I think it was, 25 years later, class of 1970, there's a reunion. My father-in-law said I was really up for that one. I was looking forward because I just knew Jack Moorman was going to be fat and bald and ugly and, well, no, sorry. He wound up looking like a middle-aged movie star. Not only that, but he was in attendance of a beautiful woman, his wife, named Peaches. So, what's the moral of this story? I don't care what class you're from or what high school you went to, there will always be a Jack Moorman. Somebody who just doesn't age. Mike?
Well, here we go. Continuing the disco era, back in the day, this is a shot out of the Burbank High yearbook over here. You note the long hair, sideburns, the nice beard, coiffed beards.
Scream 70.
Yeah, Scream 70. Note the shag carpet. Ooh, everybody had shag back then.
Casa de Tuxedo in Glendale.
Now, these are actually my suits. And
that's Mike.
This This one I took my graduation picture in at Burbank High for that year. But there was a man who lived at our church, and he had a fire at his house, and he lost his everything. They lost all their clothes, and so I was asked if I had a couple of suits I could donate him so he could attend church. Yeah, you get there, this is going.
How cool.
And I gave him that houndstooth one with the faux leather pockets on there, and
because it's polyester.
yeah, it just, and it was weird to go to church and see somebody wearing your suit.
But get to the velvet suit, Mike. Look at this. There are many artifacts. There are many artifacts in Burbank history, and the Historical Society has them, but that's the one.
My wife has thrown this out of the house. It is that exact suit, by the way. And it is custom made by Ed's Town Shop specifically to fit me. And the pants are pleated on such a steep angle to fit my 2-inch platform shoes. And yes, I used to go to Hollywood and disco dance in this. But anyway, it's a wonderful thing. Too bad that I don't have those nice ruffled shirts anymore, but I still have that nice watch chain too. But anyway, so some things never die.
Too bad we don't have the hair and waistline.
Oh yeah, I couldn't get into that. I think I could get one arm in the pants and that'd be about it.
Okay, that's the end of the section of the slideshow where we talk about the third book. The rest of the slideshow is funny, unusual, and odd photographs that are just sort of thrown in at random that we have about Burbank. A lot of these we only recently discovered. And we have a little surprise too that was just a couple of days ago. We have a big surprise
at the end because it's only 2 days old.
So, we don't normally delve into politics at all, but it's come to our notice that there is an effort to vote to change the name of David Starr Jordan Middle School. We have a candidate for a renamed David Starr Jordan Middle School. We have the perfect candidate. Mike, tell us about her.
This is Bonnie Gray. She was a world-famous rodeo rider and a stunt woman back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. She lived in Burbank her whole life and from 1891 to 1988.
Died in Burbank.
Her original name before her stage name, Bonnie Gray, was Verna Grace Smith. Anyway, she was a concert pianist.
A very accomplished musician.
She went to college. She had degrees. She was a tennis champ in college also, has trophies and awards. She learned nursing so she could go help the Apaches during the pandemic influenza in 1918. Her mother thought her Western outfits were not very genteel. And so she had her take this famous portrait so she could put that on her piano at home.
As you can see, this cowgirl cleaned up pretty well.
Yeah, and that's her pet ocelot over there.
Yeah, pet ocelot.
Now here she is in her garb again. This is on the James J. Jeffries Ranch here in Burbank. And she's all dressed up with these Native Americans here and getting ready to do a performance out there. This is her doing her signature move. Her horse's name was King Tut. And I always like that. He's a big Palomino. He's a very nice horse, it looks like. Anyway, she jumped her horse over an open Model A. And in case you don't see, the driver's in there and there's 2 passengers in the back as she does that. She at her wedding on her property, she held 100 guests and they all had to be mounted on horseback, including the minister. And the wedding took place, and to celebrate the wedding, she put her new husband in the driver's seat and jumped the horse over him. So, and she is a member of the National Cowgirl Museum and Hall of Fame. This is important. When you watch those old black and white westerns, she was the stunt woman who did all those amazing stunts for some of your favorite cowboys. Tim McCoy, Tom Mix, Hoot Gibson, and Ken Maynard. All of those guys didn't do their stunts. She did.
This woman did. Bonnie Gray.
She's amazing. Yeah.
Now, here's the kicker. Guess where her ranch was located? Where David Starr Jordan School is now. She had a ranch there. If you dig up Jordan's school, you will find all sorts of animals that she had on her ranch. That's where she buried them.
That's why the playground is where the playground is, and that's why the buildings are where the buildings are, because under the playground is King Tut.
So we think she is the ideal candidate for a renamed David Starr Jordan
There's
School.
nothing wrong with this woman. She did great things in a time when women were, not really prevalent in the business and movie world.
She's a wonderful role model. Okay, let's take a walk down Old San Fernando Road, circa 1917. We told you about De Los Wilbur, who took pictures. This is one of his photographs. In 2011, this series of photographs came into Mike's attention, and this one's dated Wednesday, 28 February, 1917, 8:15 a.m. Now, we want you to notice, first of all, there's the Farmers and Merchants Bank. That's that Greek neoclassical building, built in 1913. But when we saw this picture, something jumped right out at us, and this had an electrical sign. Now, you could see that it says theater on the sign, but we didn't know what was to the left of theater. At one point, we thought it was the Lincoln Theater. Does it look like Abe Lincoln? Is that his head? Are those his lapels? Is that a tie? Is that a suit? We also thought, or is it the Eagle Theater? Is that an eagle atop an orb?
I thought it looked like Popeye at one point.
Mike thought it looked like Popeye. We weren't certain, and we had no clue until last year. We were in the Burbank Historical Society, and we found a 1916 Seralbus, and it gave mention of the Rose Theater here in town. Now, there's also a source book, Jackson Mayer's 1975 book, and he mentions a short film entitled A Quiet Day in Burbank was shown at the Rose Theater in 1919. But it didn't say where the Rose Theater was. But the inclusion of the Rose Theater mentioned in the Seralbus lets us know that that was the Rose Theater. So now, interpreted differently, there's the rose, there are the petals, there's a bed. So before the Loma, before the Burbank, the Major, the Cornell, the Magnolia Theater, the California, the AMC Multiplex, there was the Rose Theater, Burbank's first theater. So we have a mystery solved.
And that sign had to be powered by a generator because there was not electricity at that time.
And we just recently got some more information about that. The owner kept having to put gasoline in the generator to keep those lights going. So here's a shot, De Los Wilbur shot on the top. Here's a modern day shot.
The buildings are actually still there.
And that alley is still there. So the building is still in place. Now, De Los turned his camera around. You can still see the neoclassical building there, the Farmers and Mechanics Bank. And here's the looking down the other direction down San Fernando. You can see Burbank's famous pepper trees. Burbank used to be famous for pepper trees. They were everywhere. How many of them?
They planted 58,000 pepper trees across the city.
Earlier today, we checked with the naturalist up at
the Nature Center.
There you go, the Nature Center. And he confirmed that apparently the only pepper tree he knows of is near the Mormon Church next to Palm Park. There are pepper trees there. And they have these berries that fall down. They're red. You peel the red off. You have pepper inside. That's pepper. You can grind it up.
And that's what they grind onto your salad. But the whole city had those trees all over it. Can you back up on that one?
Yeah, sure.
Just a second. I wanted to point out. Does anybody know what corner that is? Olive Avenue and San Fernando Road. These two buildings and these two buildings were torn down and backed out to widen Olive. So it's interesting to me see how narrow it was in the real original layout.
There are pepper trees, Angelino and around the Santa Rosa. So there's a photograph from 1917. There's a modern shot from 2014, De Los Wilburs. So we're going down San Fernando. Now, if you look at that photograph again, you could see a garage there. It says Goodrich Tires. There was a garage on San Fernando. And there we have a 1908 photograph of that garage, and then we have an undated one. That was O.C. Lane's business. He had a Ford dealership. He was a Ford agent. We don't know exactly when that later picture was. I tried to find out the date of that vehicle with that unique door, but I wasn't able to. You can also see there's a motorized bicycle in the shot. There's frequently a lot of interesting details in these. If you go and dine at the Gordon Biersch patio, you'll see ghost advertising that they preserved on the wall from O.C. Lanes. That's a Ford logo at the top, we just recently confirmed. And then there's Firestone tires. On this trip, we got further back and we confirmed there's a Firestone tire.
Left the closet door open and we went in there.
Yeah,
We're known
we do
to
that.
do things
we get
like
around
that.
in Burbank and a lot of places. We poke our noses in. All right, so what's there now? Well, there's a livery feed and stable business where Gordon Biersch is now. That's right there. And there's the Burbank garage. That's the brick block building, the one with that funny-looking cupola that looks like a Russian minaret. So
Earthquake damaged that and tore it down, but the building is all still there from 1888.
So here's that De Los Wilbur picture again. We've got another building to look at, and that's that furniture store there, Burbank Furniture Store. We found that in another shot. There it is. The Valley Outfitting House, where you could obtain beds, bedding, crockery, butterick patterns, and undertaking.
They were a full-service vendor.
A full service between Olive and Orange Grove, the Valley Outfitting House. Where was that? It's the same building, same configuration building, 2 different times, 2 different owners, 2 slightly different businesses.
That building was an older one. It's there first. If you notice, it's a board holding up a dirt front, and then the doors have these boards going across it. The sidewalks were not put in yet, and if you can see here, there's no building. The bank is not directly next to it. So that's a very early shot.
And there's Lassie's grandmother or something, that collie dog there. Now, if you do this one, Mike.
Okay, this is the Burbank Daily Press. Apparently news was not necessarily brought to your door by your newspaper. They also posted stories up in the window. In some things here that are to notice, the windows you see up there are that brick block building that had the cupola on it. And also this one here, it says Prince George joins the Navy, and that was a traceable thing, 1924. So since it was a hot news item that day, we're dating this picture at 1924.
That's how you got your news.
Here is our favorite Pioneer Bakery. This was in the brick block building once again. This is where you went out. This was high time in Burbank. When you wanted to go out to eat, you went here.
You hitched your horse to that
Nice bar right
wooden
here.
bar in the front.
And you could get bakery goods. It had a lunchroom in it, and it is just cool inside there. I would have loved to have seen a color picture of this. You've got this nice marble lunch counter here. We're not ready yet, but we think that may be a laptop. We're not sure. And
Mike's wife saw that and said, Mike, that's a menu. I'm with Neva on that one. It's a menu.
they make their own ice cream up there above the bar, and then they've got all the candy jars back here, and that heavy air conditioning system that they have up there.
One measly fan to cool off a room that size during a Burbank summer.
The old Coke ads above there indicate the middle one's Santa, so we're thinking this was taken right around Christmas time.
Either that or they didn't take their ads down. All right, the southwest corner of San Fernando and Olive. We get these old photographs and they bear closer scrutiny. You look at this one, the C.E. Davidson hardware, and a couple of things pop out at you. First of all, there's Rhoda Morgenstern, Mary Tyler Moore's friend, who's looking amazingly 70s in this very old photo, what looks like a pantsuit and modern hair. She's there. You can see the photographer. There's the photographer. He's reflected in the window.
He's got the hood up over his...
And then we've got the Pope walking by, apparently.
I don't know, but he really does look like the Pope.
And as De Los Wilbur's picture to show the transition between a horse Burbank and an automobile Burbank.
This is the first street sweeping vehicle in the Public Works Department within the city.
So, we've also found 5 cop and 1 fireman photos. Here they are. We like this one a lot. You want to talk about this one?
I will. This is the early Burbank Police Department. Chief George Cole was the first official police chief of Burbank. His daughter will later go on to found the Burbank Historical Society. And anyway, we've got Ulysses.
Ulysses.
I always get that one wrong. Ulysses Kyle there. And then you've got this poor little motorcycle guy here riding. He's just skinny. I don't know how.
Like a stiff wind would blow him over, but he's a cop.
This guy over here, Bill Gates, not any relation to the other Bill Gates you know of. But note the motorcycle.
We'll point out that.
You're going to take it out? All right. But anyway.
Judge Crawford, Burbank's hanging judge. He's in this shot.
One of the things I wanted to point out that I have in my collection, this is the City of Burbank City Clerk's memo stating that George Cole, here on this thing, is the official law now in Burbank. He is the chief. And it's countersigned by the clerk and two of the city council members at the time. But if you can see the folded lines from there, he carried this actually in his pocket. It's the actual document that he carried as an ID to show that he was, we're talking this is early Burbank here. So
this says, I'm the law.
This is the original document.
Look at the angle of that tire and that axle. That must have been an extremely exciting ride on that motorcycle. It's just not lining up. I like this because I have a Harley. You can still buy these Harley Davidson decals. This is from 1938, great looking Harleys. Now, when I first got this, it occurred to me because the tag shifter, the way these old motorcycles worked is your left foot manipulated a clutch, and then you had a shift knob on the side to actually shift. They were also called suicide shifters, for obvious reasons. They would send you hurtling forward sometimes, the early motorcycles. And then I like the hats, not the helmets. But there we are. There's the Burbank Police, 1938.
The other thing I'd like to say, it kills me. It looks to me like the chief can't figure out how many stripes. Everybody else got the stripes right. They all have the one. He's got 3 on one side and 1 on the other. I don't know. They usually have equal numbers. Here's another nice photograph of Burbank's finest wearing a hat, not a helmet, on his motorcycle. We're assuming it's probably one of those guys in the other.
How do you keep the hats on in a 50-mile-an-hour?
Anyway, this is on Highway 99 here in Burbank. Now, many people think that Highway 99, including the city, thinks this, went straight down San Fernando Road. It did not. It went around out by Carl's Jr. There's a side road that goes on an angle. It went down to the land which is the Golden State Freeway now, and those curves that they're trying to straighten out with all this massive, nasty construction we've got, that was Highway 99 because the state already owned the property, so they just built on there anyway. And but it went completely around the downtown Burbank section. Can you imagine all the state traffic that's like on the 5 now going through the center of Burbank? You can't park down there now with 2 cars, much less with all of those semis going.
And then this is Jane Mansfield, 1955, with 2 firemen who look like twins. Identical grins, anyway. Here's a great shot of the Burbank Police busting up a moonshine operation in the 1930s.
If you're wondering what to do with your used Sparklets bottles, here's a good idea, These guys are really a bunch of tough-looking cops to draw to there. I would not have wanted them to raid my place.
It was a different environment in the 1930s. All right, let's go to the Golden Mall. Here's a wonderful lady, once again, those cat's eye glasses, a floral print dress, and a sensible handbag. Someone's taking a photograph of her, enter the park, Burcal, Carl shoes. There she is, Save On in the background. I'm here at the Burbank Golden Mall. Oh, hello from Burbank. Here I am again. We get these photographs, just a series of Instamatic prints. Here she is crossing with the sensible handbag and the floral print dress. And why, here we are coming out of the ladies' room in the Golden Mall. Hello again. And here's another woman who's identically attired outside Burcal. Once again, a series of color photographs. We don't get color photographs very often. Here's one of their friends at See's Candies.
And what is the best candy at See's?
Bordeaux.
Oh, there, I heard it out there, yeah. It's only one candy. They don't have any other candy as far as I'm concerned.
And in a completely different vein, here's Barbara Eden on the Golden Mall. You don't see her belly button because network broadcasting standards wouldn't allow her belly button to be shown, so she's in that modest little genie dress. Everybody loves vehicles, so we found some vehicle photographs too. Mike?
I love this shot. What do you do when you're trying to fight a war and run an aircraft factory? And they cut the bus service off. They go on strike. What do? You get a bunch of stake bed trucks, you put a little sign on here that says War Workers Special, and you drive all over Southern California picking up your workers to drive them to work. This picture's shot in Glendale. Over here you see it's very close to Forest Lawn there. And the sign up here says Glendale and Burbank and San Fernando that way. So this is what they did to get Lockheed did to get their employees to work. This picture was taken June 22nd, 1943.
Now, when you see fins on cars, that 1950 feature, styling feature, it's because of a General Motors designer named Harley Earl. He was inspired by the shape of the Lockheed P-38, which was made right here in Burbank. And so that airplane inspired the Cadillac, and then the fins evolved all the way into 1964. So when you see automotive tail fins, think of Burbank.
And this is a lunchbox that I got in my collection from a Lockheed worker. It contains P-38 stickers all over it, the Hudson bomber, and even the load stickers. The P-38 was an immensely popular airplane. Inside the lunchbox, I have a collection of Lockheed's P-38 jewelry, which they sold in their commissary for your fine ladies of artistic value. There's necklaces, there's lucite pieces with a P-38 inside them. There's a set of earrings, P-38, so you have a plane on each side. It was a big deal.
My father-in-law had a watch with a P-38 decal put in the crystal, so it looks like it's on the dial, but it's really on the crystal. He tells me that was quite the thing in Lockheed to have a P-38 watch. What have we got here? We've got the Mayfield Car Company on Hollywood Way in Riverside in 1950, thereabouts. Great-looking sign up there. What on earth is that parked in front? That is a 1947 or a 1948 three-wheel Davis Devon. There were only 13 built in Van Nuys, but they sold them here in Burbank.
Jay Leno has a great video on his website of them driving one of these original Devans.
We like the Burbank chopper chick. We think this came from an Easy Riders magazine.
Yeah, her spokes aren't spinning and there's no blur, so we think she was kind of doing this on the far side, holding the bike up. But the most important thing in this picture is Rico's Pizza. You know, back in the day, Rico's was the best pizza in town.
The most important thing is the chopper chick with her hair in the wind. That is a fine-looking woman on a chopper, Mike. I'm sorry. And then we've got the Burbank police women in their Volkswagen Beetles, and we've got a Burbank cop on his Harley Davidson. I like Beetles and Harleys, so I decided to include this. Undated, 1960s, obviously. How many of you remember this guy? See, it's a little conceit. We like to be able to say we could make audiences go, aw. Yeah, Ernie Steingold.
By the way, the van is still around. It is at the Peterson Auto Museum in downtown. Yeah.
You can still see it.
You can still see it.
So, here's the Burbank Bathing Beauties series. Set your Wayback Machine to 1954, the Burbank on Parade.
And then wonder what the Burbank on Parade people were thinking.
So, we've got Burbank Bathing Beauties in black and white. How many do we get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on Al Rose, the Trailer King's vehicle. So here they are waving at the Burbankers. But even better, look at this, color photography, Kodachrome shots by a fellow named Udell McGinnis, and more bathing beauties, this time from the IA of M, the local union, the Lockheed Machinists Union. I used to be a member when I worked at Lockheed. And you think that's
I think it's a P-38 drop tank. They used them to make cars, little race cars, and ran them on small tracks and things like that. They put motors and everything in them because Lockheed had all these leftover drop tanks and they were just selling them as surplus.
Perhaps you need to explain briefly what a drop tank is.
Oh, it's an extra fuel tank that hangs under the wings to give the plane more distance. When they use up the fuel in those, they drop them to lose weight on the airplane.
That's Save On over there on the right. That's their sign. More bathing beauties. This is the Blue Book Cover Girls. And Mike and I have an argument about this.
We've got an argument. We cannot come to a conclusion here.
You will notice that there are two women, they're flanking a gentleman who is hidden by a Donald Duck
Now this is 19.
Why Donald Duck?
Disneyland is not open. You could not buy a Donald Duck of that size, stuffed or statuized. Either way, I personally think, it's my thought, that that's Walt Disney riding on the back there. He doesn't agree with me, and
If it were Walt Disney in 1954, he would be on a vehicle of his own that says Walt Disney. But anyway, he's got a bottle of something, whatever it is. He's fortified himself.
he's at least happy on the back of the car.
With the Blue Book cover girls. And have you noticed, she's got an umlaut over the A. Anyway, she's a receptionist at Valley Ford. She was Miss Valley Ford. Another bathing beauty in a car in Burbank in front of Save-On. Great yellow car. Nice white wall tires, too. And then finally, let's put women on tanks, whatever we can get them on. Here's a bathing beauty on a tank. Once again, this is a color photo from Udell McGinnis. However, we also noticed later on down in the parade, there's a black and white shot.
Note the Cornell Theater is still there.
Cornell Theater, this is an M41 Walker Bulldog tank, and there are, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there are at least 6 or 7 bathing beauties on this tank, and one very happy serviceman with his head popping up over the hatch there. And then finally, these 2 adorable girls with their feet in the water in the gutter cooling off.
After the parade.
So, here's a question we get asked from time to time. And it's important to me because I grew up on Lincoln Street. Why is Lincoln Street so darn wide at Victory Boulevard? It's a very wide street. Mike and I were moping around on it last night. This street is really wide.
80 feet wide. The normal is 60.
Now, my father, when we first moved there in 1965, he told me, well, son, the reason why it's so wide is because Lockheed used big trucks to transport the P-38s and the Lockheed planes down to other locations. Has nothing to do with Lockheed. The truth is a little different. Here's a track map from 1924 showing Buena Vista and Lincoln. You can see they're the same width. They're 80 feet. It's marked on this map. Viceroy Park hasn't been built yet. That's 1925. Lockheed didn't move into Burbank until March 1928. So those streets were wide before Lockheed ever got here. So, here's an aerial image. You could see Empire China Company over there. Lockheed isn't a feature yet. There's Lincoln Street, wide Lincoln Street. Viceroy Park is now open 1925. There's where my house would be built. And Buena Vista Street. You can see they're symmetrical. They're equally as wide. This is Brighton. It's only 60 feet wide. Not as wide. But here's the kicker. This is a 1924 Security Bank road map. I want to call your attention to the red key down there, best routes. The best routes are shown in red. So what do we get out of this? We get that Hollywood Way was originally called Pioneer Avenue. Victory was originally called Central Avenue. And you can see that Buena Vista was complete all the way down to Olive, but it ended going north. Lincoln Street was complete, and it was called the best route going north. We think what happened was that the city planners had intended Lincoln Street to be a major route. That was intended to be the major north-south route in Burbank in much the same way Buena Vista is now. It just so happened, however, that Buena Vista became the major north-south route. But we think that was intended for Lincoln Street.
And another thing that held way was at Buena Vista and Victory is where James J. Jeffries Ranch was, and it did not go through at that point. So that's why they chose to go around on the Lincoln side. James J. Jeffries later opened Buena Vista to go through to what we see there now, but he will live to regret that as his wife is killed crossing that intersection a few years later.
Now, it's in 1941, 45. She was killed crossing Buena Vista Street. The house was on one side, and the ranch was on Jeffrey's barn, where the boxing matches were held, was on the other side. Okay, when you do Burbank history and you get your pictures from the city, you find a lot of what we call industrial photos. Most of these are intensely boring. But we find some good ones every now and then.
I love this shot. Has anybody gotten bulky item pickup at your house? Well, here's what it looked like in
1950.
In 1950.
Here's the bulky item pickup guy.
You got this dude blocking traffic in this hideous old Mack truck.
There's a 1949 Ford waiting to get by.
Coming by, and here he is, and you see all the crates and stuff, you know. It must have been a miserable job back in those days.
All right, we find photos like this. This is a BWP shot in a dark alley somewhere in deep within Burbank Water and Power. Here's another great shot. What do you notice about this January 1952 photo? Do you see it? Probably not because of the resolution, but there's a girly calendar up there that made it into the shot.
They don't let that happen today.
They don't let that happen anymore. Those were different times.
And isn't this a wonderful idea? We're going to tear down the building and we're going to make it a bomb shelter. Or it looks like the bomb shelter didn't make it.
Or somebody's idea of a joke. Put the fallout shelter on a pile of rubble. We call this one Whoops. This is Palm Avenue from 1958. There's a citizen onlooker. Oh boy, look at that. Water pouring up out of the
Old Faithful in Burbank. And this guy up at the dump decided that this truck was backing up and was about to spray him down too while he was taking pictures. So he's running, and I guess his compadre decided to take a picture of him. Oh yeah, look at this guy, he's escaping, chicken.
We have a ton of photographs of landfills, and well, we couldn't leave industrial shots without this one. Why did the photographer think a destroyed porta potty at the landfill was worth documenting? But there it is. Okay, this next is a real grab bag of photos. August 2nd, 1960s, the day Winkies blew up. This is a hamburger stand named Winkies. For some unknown reason, it exploded, blew the rear out of the place.
Does anybody remember Mr. Big's Burgers? Here, yeah, you remember Mr. Big's Burgers? Well, had Winkies not blown up, Mr. Big wouldn't have been there because it's the same site. And then you can see down here what's there today next to the car wash.
So that was the day Winkies blew up.
And here we have our wonderful ice delivery. You didn't have refrigeration like you did now. And these guys, boy, they just look so happy to be in this photo. I don't know. They got their rubber boots on. The kid's eating something. I don't know what he's got. But these are the guys, CA Pipes. He brought your ice to your door so you could keep your milk cold.
And it went into not a refrigerator, but an ice box. My mom grew up with an ice box. She always referred to the refrigerator as the ice box. When I got married, do we have anything in the ice box? Wes, would you please stop referring to the refrigerator as the ice box? It was a Massachusetts thing. All right, we like this shot. It's kind of Orwellian and sinister. This is the Flying Wing, the Northrop YB-49, circa 1949. Never saw production, but it buzzed the Burbank airport looking like something out of a science fiction movie, and indeed, the only place you see one is in the 1953 Paramount War of the Worlds. It depicts one dropping an atomic bomb on the invading Martians. Wings over Burbank.
It's lonely at the top. I don't know, does anybody remember? This used to be on top of the Verdugo Mountains. You could probably see it from anywhere in town. There was a forest ranger who had to climb up this ladder, straight up. No safety rope, no chains, nothing to hold him up there, but that. And there he is down there on the bottom waiting to go up.
Imagine being up there during the Santa Anas.
You can see they had cables, but I don't...
It was guide, but still. Now, this is movie making at the old Burbank train station. You can see there's a wedding shot of some kind. This cart is festooned with all sorts of things, and various boys, some of the boys, hitched up the wagon to the horses. It says Burbank up there. That's the old Burbank railroad station. Now, we like this next shot. This was created by somebody. This is Burbank 1928 and now, as it morphed through the years. What do you notice? Well, you notice Valhalla appears in both photos, down here at the bottom.
But Lockheed isn't there. The airport is nothing's there.
Up and out there.
You can see the runways come in. The city has these portraits, as I would call them. They're about this big each. And that whole 1928 map was taken one square at a time with a biplane flying over and some dude hanging out with a camera. And to meticulously keep those straight lines, he did a stellar job, because that map is great detail. You can see all sorts of things in it, and you can zoom right down on it. It's a fantastic thing. Soon the city will be publishing that map so that people can actually see it online.
So here's a shot of the brothers Jack and James J. Jeffries glowering at the camera. Why? I don't know. Circa 1911, but they had something in common. They were both boxers. James J. Jeffries was the celebrated one. His brother, Jack, was also a boxer. They also boxed Jack Johnson. Both of them boxed Jack Johnson, and both lost. That's what they had in common. Somebody holding a dog.
Yeah, and it looks like a pug to me.
Somebody holding a pug, and it looks he's holding a pug as well. It must have been props or something.
Are they boxer dogs?
Yeah, good question.
Like boxer puppies.
And then there's this fellow.
Here's our wonderful friend Ben Tilley. We've often wondered why the city marshal was looking for him. He's 30 years old, 5 feet 6 inches or 7 in height. I like it 6 or 7 inches in height. You know, he weighed about 140 pounds, medium complexion, dark blue eyes. He's been missing for about 4 years. You know, nothing like the quick response of the BPD here.
When you look at him, what do you think of? Alfalfa? Alfalfa? Okay, here's where I embarrass Mike.
Yeah.
The chopstick. That's another remembrance, right? Well, okay. So back when we were dating the women who are now our wives, and we're talking 1979, 40 years ago, we used to dine at the Chopstick. There was the most miserable maitre d' working in that place. I don't know if you remember him. He was grumpy. Do
you remember the waiter there, those of you who ate there? That guy was the nastiest guy I've ever seen.
He was horrible. But anyway, the food was pretty good. So 1979, I'm there with my girlfriend, now my wife. Mike is there with his girlfriend, now his wife, and then we had another couple with us. We used to enjoy the food at the Chopstick. In 1979, fast forward about 30 years, I'm looking through the Los Angeles Times archive, and on a whim, I look up Chopstick. I find an article that records that the place was closed down in 1976 because they found a cat skin in the dumpster on the premises. Now, I want to call attention to your fact that we were dining there in 1979 with our girlfriends. So I talked to Mike and I said, Mike, I found an article from 1976 that indicates they had a cat problem. Oh, yeah. Mike, this was 3 years before we used to eat there with our girlfriends. Oh, yeah, that sounds about right. Mike, why didn't you tell us that we were dining in a place that had a health issue at one time? And your answer was?
Huh?
Yeah, something like that. It was something like that. Now, I wish to point out that when we gave this slideshow at the Burbank Historical Society, one lady raised her hand and said, you know, that there was a lawsuit issued by the restaurant against, I guess it was Burbank, I don't know, the health inspector, and the Chopstick won. So was there, or was there not, a cat skin in the dump? I don't know. I don't want to talk about it anymore. All right. We don't know who or why. We just know where. Mike?
Yeah, this photo's just wonderful. Everybody know where that is? City Hall. Yeah, that's the City Hall fountain. Have you ever realized and thought about how many things happen in the City Hall fountain up there? If they're not putting soap in it, they're putting red dye for Burroughs or blue dye for Burbank. You know, it's the most abused fountain in the whole city. Anyway, we do not know why these guys are in there, but they are surely having a good time. And that guy up on top, we don't know what his problem is. Hi, Mom!
He's being artistic. It's very artful. Caption this photo.
Where did you bury him?
Where did you bury him, son?
Donkey basketball, or baseball. Does anybody remember this event with the lone zebra at third base? I want to know if the zebra was better at third base because it's a longer throw to first. I don't know. But
Look at that guy in the foreground.
yeah, he's just happy to be there. I don't.
With a beard, he's having a blast.
There's no saddles. There's no saddles on anything here. This is just and then the dog in the middle of the field. Is he the umpire? I don't know, But there was a big crowd there.
So here's promoting Magnolia Park back in the 1920s. That's Betty Baker. She was a starlet, 1928, playing checkers in front of the Magnolia Park Horseshoe Club with a couple of gentlemen. We have no idea why this other woman is introducing a rabbit to a radio microphone.
What did the rabbit have to say that was important to the homes that they're trying to sell in Magnolia?
Some of these publicity photos are just plain odd. Now this is promoting Benmar Hills.
Yeah, Benmar Hills up here. This is the Old Stone Inn. We have still yet to find anything else about the Old Stone Inn, but it had a very nice sign, had a man sitting in a chair dining there and everything, and there's the building.
Electric sign.
Yeah, electric sign on top of this. This was promoting the project, as you can see the starlet up there.
I think that's Betty Baker again.
I think that's her again. She got around different housing projects in Burbank. And she's showing photographs of the property, and that man's pointing off, These are all publicity pictures, but no one has ever been able to tell us what the Old Stone Inn is.
A restaurant.
We burn witches here in Burbank. You thought Salem had a monopoly on it. Yeah, no. I love this shot. This is one of my favorite shots. When I found this, I laughed for hours. This poor little girl, look at that expression on her face. She is terrified of that witch. And here they are and getting ready to put her up on this huge wood pyre on Olive Wreck Diamond 2, in case you're interested. My favorite part of the whole thing, bucket of gasoline.
Open bucket of gas. Can you imagine anybody in the city doing anything remotely like this?
And there's that poor witch up at the top, so the little girl won't be scared of her anymore when she goes up in flames that night.
Halloween?
Yeah, it's a Halloween.
Okay, so we frequent Burbank Facebook groups, and there's a really good one called You Know You're in Burbank If, and Alex Hume, who was related to the Humes who opened up Hume's Sporting Goods, he's been sending these really great photos. We didn't have these, neither did the Historical Society.
The building is on Victory behind 7-Eleven down there, and behind it now is the Nickelodeon Studios.
And it was sort of the template for Cabela's nowadays. There are 2 stories. Look at all of the merchandise this guy had.
I love the lantern chandeliers. Did they have electric, or did they go up there and light them up with a match?
Nah,
come on.
And then we've got women's clothing up on the 2nd floor, ladies' hunting clothes, and all sorts of ammunition and guns and lanterns. And it was a fabulous place. It really was. Now, it's hard to believe, but Burbank actually looked like that one time.
The Burbank Country Club, which is now the Mormon church on top of Orange Grove, sponsored this thing where they'd bring people in for the waters. They were medicinal. They would help you. And they thought that all of this, and they had big car truck rallies. They would go up to the top, take people up there, get that water. I don't know if any of you have ever been up there where the water comes out of the places up there in the granite. But that water is ice cold, and it comes straight out of the Verdugos down the granite rocks up there. And it's probably the best water you'll ever get, especially in Burbank.
So why don't we have Sylvan Falls anymore? Well, because of modern flood control measures that had to be taken. When it rains hard here, you have mudslides down the valleys, the canyons, and it really gets to be difficult. People get injured. So modern flood control methods have largely made things like the Sylvan.
The water is treated now, but you are drinking the same water because there are all the ballparks across Sunset Canyon up there where Palm Park is, Bel Air Field, and Brace Canyon. All the baseball fields have water aquifers underneath them. The one at Palm Park is 58 million gallons.
So there's this woman named Sylvia Witz. Her father took these great Kodachrome slides. Did you ever see the Calvin and Hobbes where Calvin asks his dad, why are all these old pictures in black and white? And he tells him, well, son, we didn't get color until the 1970s or so. Life was black and white before that. Well, Here's this great shot. A couple of details here. As a child, I always hated the fires in the hills. They watched terrified when the screaming fire trucks would go down, speeding by. Dad took this photo circa 1952. There's her 1941 DeSoto parked out in front. There are geraniums growing up the power pole. The city tolerated that back then. And there's that wonderful, wonderful sports car with the couple blasting around watching the fire, the hill fire, up there in Burbank. So we did have color back in 1952. Here's more evidence. Sylvia Witz's father's Kodachrome image of a hailstorm from 1953. Interesting, huh? And we like the antennas. Built to pull in Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7.
No, 7 was
You didn't get 7. Maybe 9. Maybe 11. That was it.
That was all the channels you got, no cable.
And it was better. This is Merle Bobzian's Burbank snow photos. It actually snowed in Burbank on July.
When was the last time you saw someone build a snowman in Burbank? On Buena Vista, no doubt.
Is there anybody here who remembers that snowstorm?
No, it's all before ours.
Okay.
But it blanketed the entire town.
If you have a relative or somebody who lived in Burbank, please send us your snow photos. Now, this is the thing that made this trip special. We're going to set you up here. That's J.C. Penney's, the old J.C. Penney's building. It's now Ross. This is the Major Theater. It was a movie theater on San Fernando Road. There's 2 shots of it. It had that spire that really notable. Today, what's there is this Taekwondo place. And there's Ross next door. Mike, take it away.
Okay. We went up to Zomba and went in and spoke to the manager. One of our friends, Mike Reagan, and our erstwhile bookseller back here, Corey Fredrickson, was with us. And Mike Reagan had set it up so we could go into both stores with the owners and take a look around and see if there was any sites left of the Major.
Dojo Lee, Master Lee.
We went into the bottom of this one, nothing, up, nothing. So we were kind of disappointed. So we left, went over, let Mr. Lee know we were coming. He wanted to let us in the back because there was a class going on. So we went down and around. We come in there, we're looking around, not much of anything, you know. We're down in the basement finally and we're looking around and they created it into a practice room, you know, for the Taekwondo.
No artifacts, nothing of interest yet.
We got real depressed and like, oh well, we struck out on this one. And we started to leave. We were all pretty bummed out by it. And when Master Lee says, what about the paintings in the attic?
There are paintings in the attic. So he brings over a ladder, takes down this metal door. I go up the ladder with my cell phone, and that's part of the old Major Theater.
And you guys are seeing these for the first time.
You're seeing it for the first time. These haven't been seen in I don't know how many years since the Major Theater. Is there anybody here who's ever seen a film at the Major Theater?
All right. Major Theater and the Loma Theater.
But you actually saw a film in the Major Theater.
Yes.
Do you remember this detail?
I don't remember that.
Red, white, and blue fake curtains that were painted on the walls, or the detail on the pillars. That was a part of the Major Theater. It's still there up in the attic of the Taekwondo place.
I was a little boy when I was. Yeah.
Here's another shot, more.
The rounded part up there is probably we were standing straight over the projector screen. And the curved part there is where the curtains hung from. On both sides, they would have curved out like that, and the screen would have been in the center. So we were able to see the entire thing. I bet they had recessed lighting in those slats.
Yeah, they probably had lights along the top that they would dim when they showed.
They still do that type of thing in theaters today. But these have not been seen since 1950.
And that's a feature of this trip to Burbank. This concludes our slideshow. And here's where you applaud. Thank you very much. What we'd like to do now is we will take questions and answers for a short period of time, and then we will go to that table, and if you'd like to buy the books, we will autograph them for you.